Hello everyone, today I'm going to give you some reading and listening tips for the TOEFL. Now, to begin with, the reading tips. In this section, we give you a lot of preparation for test day and for the reading TOEFL section. Now, let's begin with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is read complex texts. Read texts that are very difficult. The best way to improve your reading ability is to read as many English language texts as you possibly can. By doing this, you will not only enhance your vocabulary and grammar knowledge, but you will also learn how arguments are structured and what ultimately makes them compelling to read. So for example, popular newspapers, journals, magazines, those are very good places to start. And some examples obviously could be the New York Times, CNN, The Economist. These are many different sources that you can use online about the news, and you can practice reading and learning new vocabulary as much as you can. And as you read, be sure you understand the main point of the text and what the author is trying to say. You should also be able to identify what kinds of transitions and organizational patterns the author uses in order to effectively present his or her thoughts. Now, moving on to tip number 2. Choose a reading strategy that works well for you. Now, there are different strategies obviously, so you need to choose which one is convenient for you. Before taking the TOEFL, you must decide on a reading strategy. So I'm going to give you some of the following, and then you will be able on your own time or in class to be able to practice them, and then you will determine which one is best for you. So, to begin with, the first strategy or the first tip could be read the entire passage first, skim the passage, and then answer the questions. Then answer the questions paragraph by paragraph. Also, read the questions first. And out of these, I recommend choosing one of the first 3 methods. As method 4 tends to be, most of the time, it tends to be the longest or the most time consuming. However, you should choose the method that works best for you. And if that happens to be method 4, then that's fine, use that one. Every person is different. To figure out which method is right for you, try out the different strategies that were just mentioned right now, and then practice them during different quizzes or tests in class with the applications. Give yourself about 20 minutes for each passage and question set. Once you've finished, compare your scores for each set that you do to see which reading strategy had the best score and results for you. Tip number 3, pace yourself. This has to do with time. Many test takers run out of time on the reading section. On this section, you'll have about 60 minutes or a little bit more to read 3 to 4 passages and answer 36 to 56 questions in total. But how should you divide this time so that you're not rushing at the end? That's the important question. Since you'll have about 12 or 13 questions per passage, try to spend no more than 20 minutes on each passage and question set. More specifically, spend about 5 minutes reading the passage and about 1 minute per question. Tip number 4. This tip is search for evidence in the passages. Now, the important trick here to the reading is that all the questions can be answered using specific evidence in the passages. In other words, all of the information you need to answer a reading question is directly given to you in the passage. You just have to find it. So, for example, if a question asks you about a specific paragraph, then the answer will be in that paragraph specifically. You don't need to waste time checking other parts of the passage. That would just be a waste of time. You can practice looking for evidence in these passages and also in different sources that I will be giving you in class. But one good source on Google is called Prep Scholar, so you can try one of those so you could practice at home. Another tip, which is tip number 5, is skip difficult questions and return to them later. So if you encounter a reading question you don't understand, then don't spend a large amount of time worrying about it. Just skip it and move on. Eventually you could go back to it later with the extra time that you have. Moving past difficult questions lets you pace yourself more efficiently and also prevents you from spending too much time working on a single question. Because if you do that, you won't be able to answer the rest, and you will receive less points. Once you have finished the section, go back to the difficult question and try to rework it. If you still can't figure it out or are running out of time, then use the process of elimination, which we will talk about, to take an educated guess. Remember, wrong answers don't count against you, so it's always better to guess than to leave a question blank. Tip number 6, double check your answers. If you have extra time at the end of the reading section, briefly double check all of your answers. This way, you can ensure you didn't accidentally mark a different answer choice than the one you wanted and that you answered all questions in that section. So that's why it's very important to go back to make sure you didn't make any mistake. Double checking is especially helpful because it lets you look at your answer choices with a fresh set of eyes. If you're not certain about an answer you chose, you can use this time to briefly rework the question again. Go through the evidence you originally found in the passage and check for any new evidence that you might have missed before. If something doesn't make sense, consider changing your answer choice. So those are some tips for the reading section. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the listening section and some tips. So the TOEFL listening tips. We're going to take a look at some of the best listening tips for the TOEFL and some strategies for the listening section as well. So tip number 1, watch and listen to English news. That's really one great way to improve your listening skills. It's by watching English language news stations. Listen to these channels. They have articles to read, but you can also listen to them. Okay, so tip number 2, listen to English podcasts. Podcast is not necessarily a video that you're going to be watching. It's just simply going to be as if it were a radio station. Another way to improve your listening skills is to listen to these podcasts. They allow you to hear native speakers talk in English. And they're very helpful because they don't use videos, like I just said, or transcripts to guide you. You will only be listening. So you will rely entirely on your listening skills in order to understand what is being said. And this will be very useful, and also importantly because of the different pronunciations and accents that you will hear. But most importantly is to focus on the American accent. Which brings me to my next tip. Tip number 3, be able to understand different English accents. On the TOEFL listening, most speakers will have a North American accent, but you will also be able to practice with other accents or pronunciations if necessary so that you could be able to tell the difference, such as British or Australian or New Zealand accent, but you will primarily be studying the American English. That's the one that you need, that's the one that's important, that's the one that you will need for the TOEFL. You won't need to worry about other accents then. So you should expose yourself to mostly the American accents, and if you can, the other accents as well, but with a main focus on the American accent. So the best way to prepare is also to speak with native English speakers who are from the United States, even if they're not from the United States as well, but as long as they have a good accent. If you know people, speaking to them is a really good way to do this. You'll definitely need to familiarize yourself with as many accents as possible to compare, but make sure that the priority will be the American one. Tip number 4, pay close attention to replayed audio clips. Obviously on the TOEFL you will see that there are specific questions where they replay an audio clip. So on the listening, sometimes from a lecture or from a conversation that you listen to, they will be replayed before you answer a specific question. In these cases, always pay close attention to the replayed clip. This is because the clip will contain the answer to the question that comes after it. So that's why it's very important. If you have already taken detailed notes on the full audio clip the first time you hear it, then listen closely again to the replayed clip, because you might listen or catch something important that you didn't hear the first time. So when you get to these questions, make sure to pay specific attention to that. So these are just some reading and listening tips that I can give you for today. Next time, I will talk to you a little bit more about the speaking section and the writing section as well. So have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.